The package arrived on a Tuesday, which was the first thing wrong with it. Tuesdays in Lagos belonged to the market women, to the diesel generators warming up at dawn, to the particular hush of a house that had not yet decided whether to receive visitors. Couriers came on Mondays or Thursdays, never Tuesdays. And yet there it was on the veranda tiles. A brown paper parcel the size of a hymnal, tied with twine, sweating faintly in the heat that had already settled into the bougainvillea by 7 in the morning. Ada saw it before her son did. She had been carrying a chipped enamel cup of cocoa down the corridor, the cocoa butter scent of her hair lotion clinging to her shoulders like a second skin, and she stopped at the doorway and went very still. She had taught herself, over 6 years, to go still before she went anywhere else. The body learned what the mind refused. Minjay padded past her in his school socks. Iyama, the courier man, left without ringing. I see him, baby. He looked tired or sad. I don't know which one. He bent to read the label, his small fingers already moving with the patient, surgical care he brought to his chessboard. He was 10 now. He was always reading something. It's for you. From... I can't read this part. Step back, Omalicha. He stepped back. He always did when she used that voice. He had inherited many things from her. Bronze skin, a stubborn jaw, his grandfather's slow grin. But more than any of them, he had inherited the instinct to recognize when his mother had become a thin sheet of glass. She crouched. The handwriting on the label was a man's, slanted hard to the right, with the tail of the G curled back on itself the way only one person had ever written it. She pressed her thumb into the inside of her left wrist, into the soft place where her pulse lived, and she pressed until the skin went white. The return address read only, Apapa Harbor, Dock 9. There was no Dock 9 at Apapa. There had not been one since the year her father was buried. Iyama, Minjay said carefully, are you crying? No, baby. Your eyes are crying. That's different. She took the package inside and set it on the kitchen counter and did not open it. She made him breakfast, egg, plantain, the small, sweet tomatoes she bought from Mama Bisi on Fridays, and she watched her own hand pour the oil into the pan without shaking, and she thought, with the cold clarity that had been her companion since the winter she walked out of a Gangwon hospital in a stolen nurse's coat, that someone in this world still believed she had unfinished work. She wiped her hands. She slid the parcel into the drawer above the cutlery, beneath the dish towel her aunties in Enugu had sent for her 30th birthday. She told Minjay to finish his juice. But she did not throw the parcel away. And in the back of her mind, beneath the calm of a woman who had learned to look ordinary in her own kitchen, a second question rose up and replaced the first. Not who sent this. What does he know about Pyongyang? 6 summers before the package arrived, in the rooftop garden of a glass tower in Uido, a girl from Apapa was deciding she did not want to be at her own welcome party. The gala was the kind of event her father had insisted she attend. For the face of the family, Chief Emeka had said, in that low rumble that meant the matter was already closed. So she stood near a low wall of potted bamboo, with a flute of champagne she had no intention of drinking, watching the lights of the Han River and pretending to find them remarkable. She was 19. She wore a green silk dress her mother had chosen, gold hoops the size of her smallest finger, and the small private armor of a girl who had decided, somewhere between Lagos and Incheon, to be unimpressed by everything. You look like you're plotting an exit. She turned. The boy beside her was tall and slightly stooped, the way tall boys stoop when they have not yet forgiven their height. His suit was good. His shoes had been polished by someone who loved him. His eyes, she would remember this later, in a Gangwon ward, when she could not remember her own name. were the eyes of a person who had been told to smile so often that smiling had begun to hurt him. "I am plotting an exit," she said. "I just haven't picked one." "There's a service stair behind the kitchens. Goes down to a loading bay. Nobody checks." "You've done this before." "Every party my mother throws." She laughed and was surprised at the sound. He was surprised too. He rolled his left sleeve up to the elbow as if he had suddenly grown warm, then rolled it down again, then rolled it back up. She would learn, over the years, that he did this whenever he was about to say something he believed. "I'm Junho." "I know who you are." "Then you have an advantage." "A daze," she said. "Ada, if you can't manage it." "A daze," he said carefully, giving it the full 4 syllables, the way her grandmother said it. "I can manage it." They did not leave by the service stair. They stayed on the roof until the orchestra below switched from Vivaldi to a Korean ballad she did not know yet, the one she would hear 7 years later in a Gangnam ballroom, carrying a tray of someone else's champagne. He told her his mother believed in 300-year-old blood. She told him her father believed in the West African coast. They agreed, without saying so, that they were both being shaped into instruments for empires they had not chosen. When she finally let him walk her to the elevator, he asked, very seriously, what her favorite food in Seoul was so far. "I haven't found one." "Then I haven't done my job." She thought, watching the elevator doors close on his face, on the way he was still standing there in that small, accidental stoop, that she would remember this Tuesday. She did not know yet that it was a Tuesday. She would only learn later, going back to count. In the corner of the rooftop garden, unseen by either of them, a woman in a charcoal gray hanbok set down a teacup and watched the elevator descend. She did not smile. She did not frown. She made a small note in the back of a leather diary and slipped it into her sleeve. "Stay with me. What's in that brown paper parcel on Ada's counter is going to undo 6 years of careful silence, and what Junho did the night the East Wing burned is going to surface in a kitchen, not a courtroom. If you want to walk this braid with us all the way to the photograph from Pyongyang, hit subscribe before we go any further, because from here, the present tightens, and it does not loosen again." The visa office in Victoria Island smelled of photocopier toner and a thin chemical lemon. Ada had been waiting 2 hours. She had filled out the forms in blue ink, then refilled them in black, because Minjae had warned her the consulate clerks were strict about blue, and Minjae, at 10, was already more careful than most adults she knew. She had not expected the man behind the glass to slide the folder back to her and say, "Madam, there's a hold on this file." "A hold?" "A custody flag. From Seoul." She put both hands on the counter. She put them there flat, because she did not trust them in the air. "My son is a Nigerian citizen. He was naturalized at 6. I have the certificate." "It's not a citizenship issue, madam. It's a court summons. Family Court of Seoul Central District. You're named?" "The minor child is named." The clerk's voice softened, almost in spite of himself. "You'll need to appear, or send representation." "Who filed it?" He glanced at the screen. He looked at her. He looked back at the screen. "The petitioner is listed as Cheon Hyerin." For a moment, the lemon smell in the room turned metallic and far away. Ada felt her thumb move, automatically, to the inside of her left wrist. She pressed. The clerk pretended not to notice. "Madam, are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "That," she said quietly in Korean, and his eyes flicked up because she had not used Korean until that sentence, "is because I am not." She walked out into the white afternoon and stood on the steps until the heat reordered her. A grandmother filing for visitation from a single-room apartment in Daegu. It was almost laughable. It would have been laughable if Ada had not known the way she knew her own son's footsteps in the corridor, that Madame Herein did not file petitions she could not enforce. She called Seoyeon from the car. Seoyeon answered on the second ring, in the middle of a lecture hall by the sound of it, her voice low. I know, I just saw. How? My old professor forwarded it. She's still on the family court mailing list. Ada, listen to me. This is not about visitation. I know. They're moving something. Hierin doesn't have the money to move something legally, so she's using the court to surface him. They want him on record. They want a photograph. They want him located. He's located. He's in primary 5. He's playing chess on Saturdays. Ada, I'm not bringing him to Seoul. You don't have to bring him. You have to appear. Or they win by default, and a Korean court grants a Korean grandmother supervised contact with a Korean passport-eligible minor, and from there... Seoyeon stopped. Ada heard her breathe. From there, it stops being our problem and becomes the embassy's problem. And the embassy is not our friend right now. In the back of the car, the driver pretended to be uninterested in the conversation. He was new. Ada did not yet know how much he could be trusted, and so she switched languages mid-sentence, sliding from English to Igbo and then to Korean again, the way she did now, the way she had begun to do without thinking. I cannot go back to that city, Seoyeon. You can. You came back from worse. Last time I came back as a stranger. Then come back as yourself. Ada watched the palm trees go by. She thought about the parcel in the drawer above the cutlery. She thought about the slant of the handwriting on the label. Seoyeon. My father wrote to me. There was a long silence on the line, long enough that she could hear, very faintly, a young woman in the lecture hall asking a question about Article 12. Ada. It came this morning. Ada, no. I haven't opened it. Don't open it on your own. Wait for me. I'm in Lagos Friday. Seoyeon, promise me. Wait. Ada did not promise. She said, I have to go, and ended the call. And she sat in the back of the car with both palms turned up in her lap. And she thought about how a woman could spend 6 years rebuilding a life and still be standing at a counter somewhere, learning that the foundation had a tenant she had never met. That night she opened the parcel. She did it after Minjae was asleep, with a single lamp on, the kitchen smelling faintly of the agushi she had warmed for his supper. The twine came away easily. The brown paper folded back the way her father used to fold the newspaper, in clean exact thirds, and that was the first thing that made her sit down hard on the kitchen stool. Inside was a leather-bound ledger she had last seen in a Busan back room in the year of her resurrection. She knew the cover by the small burn mark in the upper right, the size of a thumbnail where Uncle Tunda had once set down a cigarette and then sworn in Yoruba at his own carelessness. She knew the spine. She knew the weight. On top of the ledger lay a single photograph, face up. A man with a gray beard, an unmarked dock. Snow on the railing behind him, although it had not snowed in Lagos in any year of recorded memory, and the light on his face was wrong for any harbor she had ever known. He was not smiling. He was not waving. He was simply standing the way he used to stand at the end of the Apapa Pier when she was a child, with his hands behind his back, watching the water as if he could read it. There was no note this time, only, slid between the pages of the ledger, a folded sheet of his stationery with 2 lines on it. The war is not over. Come home when you are ready. Ada sat at the counter for a long time. The cocoa butter scent of her hair drifted up around her, the way it had drifted up around her mother once and around her grandmother before that. She did not cry. She thought of 3 things in sequence. A Tuesday on a rooftop? A Tuesday on a veranda? A coffin she had buried in a Seoul cemetery 6 years ago, into which her child had not been placed, and into which, she now had to consider, her father had also not been placed. She thought about who could possibly have known where to find a ledger that 2 governments had quietly assumed was lost. Then she folded the paper back into the ledger and put both of them in the cupboard above the refrigerator, behind a tin of powdered milk Min-jae would never reach. She washed her cup. She turned off the lamp. She went upstairs and stood in the doorway of her son's room and watched him breathe for a long time. His stuffed tiger crushed against his chin, the way it had been crushed against his chin in a roadside handover outside Dijon when he was 4 years old and did not know her. She did not say, "I will keep you safe." She had learned, the hard way, not to make that promise aloud. Long before the parcel, in a cramped apartment in Sinchon with a kettle that whistled too loudly, Ada was learning how Junho took his tea. He took it badly. He let it steep until it was bitter, then drowned it in honey, then complained about the honey. She had begun making it for him in self-defense. She had also begun, without admitting it to herself, making it for him because the sound of the kettle had become the sound of the room she most wanted to be in. They had been together, in secret, for almost a year. Their fathers did not yet know. Their mothers suspected and pretended not to. He was finishing his master's. She was halfway through hers. They lived in the small, dishonest geography of students who could not yet afford honesty. A borrowed apartment 2 stops from campus, a calendar of stolen evenings, the slow accumulation of a domestic life neither of them had asked permission to build. He cooked badly and apologized for it. She cooked well and refused to teach him, because teaching him would have made her into someone's wife before she was ready. She braided her hair on Sundays at the kitchen table, the cocoa butter open beside her, and he sat across from her doing nothing in particular. The cuff of his left sleeve rolled to the elbow, watching her hands. "You're going to make me a terrible husband one day," he said once, without looking up. "How?" "You'll braid your hair. I'll just watch." "That's a terrible husband?" "My mother would call it that." "Your mother calls a lot of things that." He smiled, the small, slow smile she would later learn to mistrust, the one that meant he had heard her and was choosing not to defend the woman in question. He poured her tea badly. He apologized. She kissed him because the apology was, in its way, the most honest sentence he had ever offered her. They had small, private rituals. He left her a folded square of paper in her coat pocket every Monday. A Korean word she did not yet know, with a tiny pencil sketch of what it meant. Knoll, sunset, sexy. Bride, but old-fashioned, the kind of bride a grandmother would describe. Iopta. Not there. Missing. She left him a phrase in Igbo, written in lipstick on his bathroom mirror, every Friday. Ihum Nanya. He could not pronounce it. He practiced it in the shower, badly, and she pretended not to hear. One evening, late, when the kettle had cooled and the rain outside had thinned to a faint hiss against the window, he sat down on the floor at her feet and put his head against her knee. She did not move her hand from his hair. He spoke into the cotton of her skirt. "If my mother ever asks you to choose," he said, "between her and me, choose me." "She won't ask." "She will." "Then I'll choose you." He was quiet a long time. Then he said, very softly, in a voice she would later play back to herself in a Gangwon corridor with the lights off, "Choose harder than that." She should have heard it. She did hear it. She filed it as tenderness, because the alternative, that he already knew, at 23, that he would one day fail her, was a sentence she could not yet read. A year after that night, they married in a chapel in Apapa, with her father grinning like a man who had finally caught the future in a net. A year after that, Minjae was born, bronze-skinned, sharp-eyed, screaming the unbothered scream of a child who knew already that he was loved by at least one of his parents without condition. Madame Hyarin came to the hospital. She did not hold him. She brought instead a small lacquered box, and inside it a length of red silk thread, the kind Korean grandmothers tie around a newborn's wrist for luck. She set it on the bedside table. She did not tie it. "For when he is older," she said in Korean, smiling at the wall behind Ada's head. "When he looks more like us." Junho, standing in the doorway, rolled his left sleeve to the elbow and rolled it back down again, and said nothing at all. Ada kept the red thread. She kept it in a drawer for 2 years. On the night the East Wing burned, she would reach for that drawer first and find the thread gone and understand, in a way the police report would never be able to articulate, exactly what was happening to her and how long it had been planned. Pause with me. If you had been the woman in that hospital bed, with a son in your arms and a length of red thread on the table that no one would tie, would you have known? Would you have heard it the way I'm hearing it now, 6 years late? Tell me in the comments. And then come back, because the kitchen we are about to walk into is the one that breaks them. Friday came. Seo Yan arrived in Lagos at 1 in the afternoon with a single carry-on, the rumpled linen of a long flight, and the calm of a woman who had argued the case for human rights in 3 languages before lunch. She sat at Ada's kitchen counter and read the note from the ledger twice. She did not pick up the photograph. She said, "Minjae cannot be in this house when we open the rest of it. He's at chess." "Good. How long?" "Until 5. Seo Yan nodded once. She got up and put the kettle on, because she had learned over 6 years of friendship that Ada thought better with something warm in her hand. She moved through the kitchen with the small, confident grace of a woman who had been a guest here often enough to be family. Minjae called her Imo. She corrected his Korean, and he corrected her Yoruba, and they fought about which of them had the worse accent. "Ada." "This handwriting is your father's." "I know." "And the ledger." "I know." "And the photograph." Ada looked up. Seo Yan had not picked up the photograph, but she had laid 2 fingers very lightly on its edge, the way one lays fingers on a sleeping animal one does not want to wake. "Seo Yan, tell me what you see." "I see a man at a dock. I see snow that doesn't belong in Apapa. I see a railing that's wrong for any Nigerian harbor I've ever stood on. And the light is from the north." Seo Yan looked up. "Ada, the light is from the north." In the silence that followed, the kettle finished. Neither of them moved to turn it off. The whistle thinned, and finally cut out on its own. 7 Januaries ago, in the east wing of an estate in Gangnam, a fire had been started in a child's nursery using an accelerant that smelled, very faintly, of citrus and toner. Ada had been at a charity gala. She had come home in a black silk dress and silver heels she would later throw into the Han River. She had run through corridors she had walked every day for 2 years, calling a name. She had been held back by men in dark suits with the calm, professional grip of men who had been told exactly how long to hold. She had bitten one of them on the wrist. She had seen Junho at the end of the corridor, standing very still, his left sleeve unrolled all the way to the cuff for once, his eyes refusing to meet hers. She had screamed her son's name into the smoke. A woman she did not know had said the word unstable. A man she did not know had said the word sedation. A driver she had once tipped generously at Christmas had carried her out of the house in his arms, and she had thought, with the last clear thought she would have for 18 months. He is being kind because he knows what they are about to do to me. 6 years later, in a kitchen in Lagos, Ada finally said the sentence aloud that she had not said to another human being in all of those 6 years. The fire wasn't in the nursery? Seo Yan went very still. What? The fire was in the east wing? Min-jae's crib was in the west? I moved him 3 weeks before? I didn't tell Junho. I didn't tell anyone. The nursery on the east side it was a decoy. She stopped. She pressed her thumb into her wrist. I had been having dreams. I thought I was being paranoid. I moved him. I told the staff it was for the morning sun. Ada. They burned an empty room, and then they took him out of a room they didn't know they were taking him out of. And Junho? She stopped again. The kettle ticked as it cooled. Junho stood at the end of the corridor and he didn't look at me. And I thought all this time he didn't look at me because he was guilty. He wasn't. He didn't know. She lifted her face. Her eyes were dry. He didn't know which wing. He didn't know I'd moved the crib. He stood there because he thought my son was dead too. He stood there because his mother had told him my son was dead, and he believed her, the way he had always believed her, and he could not look at me because he could not bear to be the man who had let her do it. Seo Yan sat down. She had not realized she had been standing. You never told me this. I never told anyone this. Why now? Ada slid the photograph across the counter with one finger. Because if my father is alive, she said very quietly, then somebody has been moving pieces for 6 years that I thought were sitting still. And if somebody has been moving pieces, then the question is not who burned the east wing. The question is, who told my mother-in-law which wing to burn? Seo Yan stared at the photograph. The light from the north, the unmarked railing. Ada. There was a woman. Where? At the engagement party, 6 years ago. I keep coming back to her. I never told you. A woman in a charcoal handbuck standing near my father. She didn't drink. She didn't eat. She watched you the entire night. A lot of people watched me that night. Not like this. This was a woman who recognized you. Ada closed her eyes. In the dark behind them, a rooftop in Yoido reassembled itself. A leather diary slipped into a sleeve. A Tuesday she had not known was a Tuesday until she went back to count. She opened her eyes. Seo Yan, the summons. What about it? Hyerin doesn't have the money to file a summons in Seoul Family Court. I said that. Then somebody filed it for her. Outside, on the veranda, a car pulled up. They both heard it. They both froze. Then Min-jae's voice, light and indignant, calling from the gate. Yama, the chess coach made me play the white pieces again. It's not fair. And the spell broke. Seo Yan stood up. She did not look at Ada. She walked to the door and opened it and bent and gathered Min-jae into the kind of hug that 10-year-olds endure rather than enjoy. Over the top of his head, she met Ada's eyes. The look between them was the look of two women who had, 6 years ago, locked themselves into a powder room in Gangnam and decided to stop being sacrifices. It was the same look, exactly. Min-jae went to bed at 9, with a chess problem unsolved on his pillow and a stuffed tiger that had survived 3 continents tucked under his chin. Ada sat with him until his breathing slowed. She kissed his forehead. He muttered something in Korean about a knight on F6. She smiled in spite of herself. She came back down to the kitchen at 10:30. Seo Yan had laid the ledger open on the counter, with the photograph beside it and a yellow notepad beside that. She had made fresh tea, properly steeped, no honey, the way Ada actually liked it. Sit, Seo Yan said. Ada sat. I love you. Seo-yeon said. Ada looked up sharply. It was the first time either of them had said it. Seo-yeon did not look away. You are not going to like what I am about to do, Seo-yeon went on. I am telling you I love you first, because what I am about to tell you would be unbearable from anyone else's mouth, and I am not willing to be anyone else's mouth tonight. Seo-yeon. Listen. Ada listened. The petitioner on the custody summons is Cheon Hye-rin. The filer is a law firm in Seoul I used to work for as a summer intern. I called them on the plane. They told me the retainer was paid in cash by a woman in a charcoal hanbok who did not give a name. They also told me, because the junior associate is an old friend and owes me her career, that the retainer was paid 18 months ago. 18 months. Before the visa hold, before the parcel, before any of this surfaced. Someone has been sitting on this paperwork for 1.5 years, Ada. Waiting? For what? For your father to surface. Ada did not answer. She lifted the tea. She set it down. She lifted it again. The cocoa butter scent rose up around her, and for a moment she was 19 on a rooftop in Uido, and a tall boy was telling her about a service stair, and she was deciding, without knowing she was deciding, to spend the next 10 years of her life learning how to survive a family. Seo-yeon. Junho gets out in 16 years. Yes. He's been writing to Min-jae. I don't show him the letters. I keep them in a box in the cupboard. I know. I've seen the box. He writes badly. He apologizes too much. He doesn't know how to be a father in a letter. Most men don't. He didn't know about the wing. You said? Seo-yeon, if he didn't know about the wing, then somewhere in those 16 years. She stopped. She pressed her thumb into the inside of her wrist, hard, and then she let it go. She set both hands flat on the counter. I am not going to forgive him. I want to be clear about that. I know. But I am also not going to keep my son from a father who was lied to. I know that too. They sat with it. The kitchen ticked the way kitchens tick at night, with the small, mechanical confidences of refrigerators and clocks. Outside, the bougainvillea moved against the window in a wind that had finally cooled. Ada, Seo-yeon said after a long while. What are you going to do about the photograph? Ada looked at it. The man with the gray beard, the light from the north, the railing that did not belong to any harbor her father had ever stood on. I'm not going to Pyongyang, she said. No. I am going to Seoul. I am going to appear at the family court. I am going to bring the ledger. I am going to bring the photograph. And I am going to find the woman in the charcoal hanbok. And I am going to ask her, in Korean and in Igbo and in English, 3 languages, 3 identities, 1 woman, who has been moving pieces in my life for 6 years. And Min-jae. Min-jae stays in Lagos, with you, in this kitchen. Ada, you said you loved me? I do. Then stay in this kitchen. Seo-yeon let out a long, slow breath. She reached across the counter. She closed her hand over Ada's. Their fingers laced, bronze and pale, scarred and unscarred, the way they had laced 6 years ago on a marble bathroom floor in Gangnam when a wine glass shattered and an alliance was born. Okay, she said. Okay. They sat there a long time. The tea cooled. Neither of them noticed. 6 weeks later, Ada stood on the veranda of the colonial house in Lagos with a cup of cocoa in her hand and watched her son ride a bicycle that was slightly too big for him in slow, careful loops around the bougainvillea. Seo-yeon sat on the steps with a legal pad in her lap, half reading, half watching. Uncle Tunda, gray now at the temples, leaned against the rail and pretended to disapprove of the bicycle. Ada had come back from Seoul 10 days earlier. She had appeared in family court. She had brought no ledger and no photograph because she had decided, on the plane, that the woman in the charcoal handbak was not a person you ambushed with paper. She had instead, in the corridor outside the courtroom, walked up to a woman with iron-gray hair and a small leather diary in her sleeve, and said, in Korean, very quietly, "I have your photograph. I have your handwriting. I have your ledger. I do not have my father. Where is he?" The woman had looked at her for a long time. The corridor had smelled, faintly, of citrus and toner. "Your father is in Pyongyang," the woman had said finally. "He is alive. He is not free. He has been alive for 6 years, and he will continue to be alive for as long as you do nothing. The moment you move, my employers will move him. Do you understand me, daughter of Emeka?" "I understand you." "Then withdraw the custody petition I filed in his name and go home." Ada had not flinched. She had pressed her thumb into the inside of her wrist, and then she had let it go. "The petition wasn't filed in his name," she had said. "It was filed in Hyerin's. You used her. The way you used Junho. The way you tried to use me. And I have, in a safety deposit box in Lagos, a 412-page dossier my late father compiled before he was not killed. It is dated. It is notarized. It is in the custody of a journalist at the BBC. If my father dies in Pyongyang of anything, old age, a bad oyster, a bullet, that dossier becomes the lead story on 3 continents within 24 hours. You will not survive it." The woman had smiled, faintly, for the first time. It was the smile of a chess player who has just discovered the board is being played by someone she had underestimated. "You have your mother's mouth a days. I have my father's patience. Then we will wait, you and I." "Yes." "And in the meantime, your son will grow." "Yes, and one day," the woman had inclined her head, not a bow, but the small, precise nod with which one professional acknowledges another, and walked away down the corridor and out of Ada's life, for now. Ada had withdrawn the petition. She had flown home. She had not opened the parcel again. She had moved the ledger to a vault in Lagos and the photograph to the inside flap of a book Minjae would not open for another 20 years. The selected poetry of Christopher Okigbo. He would find it then. He would understand it then, not before. On the veranda, the cup of cocoa in her hand had gone cool. The cocoa butter scent of her hair drifted up around her, the way it had drifted up on the morning a brown paper parcel had appeared on these same tiles, and she let it, and she breathed it in, and for the first time in 6 years she did not flinch from her own smell. Minjae rode past, too fast, on the bicycle. "Iyama, watch." "I'm watching." "Not watching enough. Watch with your eyes." "I am watching with my eyes, Omalicha." "Then say it. Say watching." "Watching." He grinned. He pedaled harder. He took the corner around the bougainvillea badly, and almost fell and did not fall. And Seo-yeon, on the steps, looked up from her legal pad and met Ada's eyes, and the look between them said the same thing it had always said. "We are still here. We made it. Both of us." That night, after Minjae was asleep with his stuffed tiger, after Uncle Tunde had gone home, after Seo-yeon had retired to the guest room with the door open in case anyone needed her, Ada walked down to the kitchen one more time. She put the kettle on. She made tea, properly steeped, no honey, and she poured a second cup, and she set it across from her at the counter, and she sat for a long time with the empty chair, and she said in Igbo, very softly, the way her grandmother had once said it across a different table, "Ihum Nanya." She was not sure who she was saying it to. Her father, maybe? Her mother. The version of herself who had stood on a rooftop in Yowido when she was 19 and decided to be unimpressed by everything. The version of Junho who had rolled his sleeve to the elbow and asked her, in a borrowed apartment in Sinchon, to choose harder than she knew how to choose. The son upstairs, the friend down the hall, the woman in the charcoal hanbok who would, somewhere in Seoul, drink her own tea tonight and wait. Maybe all of them. Maybe only herself. She drank both cups. She washed both cups. She turned off the lamp, and in the dark of the kitchen, with the bougainvillea moving softly against the window, in a wind that had finally cooled, the dead woman who had risen 6 years ago on a marble floor in Gangnam stood very still in her own life, in her own house, in her own skin, and listened to her son breathe upstairs and decided, quietly, the way she decided everything now, that the war could keep. The war would always keep. Her boy would not. If you've come this far with me, then somewhere between the brown paper parcel on the veranda and the woman in the charcoal handbook in the courthouse corridor, you felt something turn. And I want to know which scene did it. Was it the moment Ada realized Junho hadn't known which wing of the house was burning? Was it the red silk thread on the hospital bedside table that was never tied? Or was it the empty chair in the kitchen, at the end, with the second cup of tea poured for no one and for everyone? Tell me down in the comments. And if this one stayed with you, like it before you leave, subscribe so the next chapter finds you, because next week we're walking into a Hanok courtyard in Jeonju, where a daughter who buried her mother is about to learn the woman in the coffin wasn't her mother at all. I'll see you there. Stay warm.